I'm so glad you could join us today for our first Cultural Spotlight and Winning in US. Today, we're going to talk about something that we love, which is Formula One. And we're going to talk about something we also love, which is data, insights, and brand specifically chose this one to kick it off. Cultural moment going on this week with the launch of Formula One, the movie. And this is a great thing for us. So for those who don't know me yet, my name is Rodrigo Maroni. I'm the head of US at Winning. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what we do in a second. But first, I want to introduce you to a very special surprise guest that many of you will have the pleasure to see for the first time. And I already had the pleasure of hosting a panel with him last month at the Miami Formula One GP. My great friend, Shergul Assad, he is the head of North America Aston Martin Formula One team. Is that correct, Shergul? Can you say a few words and introduce?
Yes. Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm Shergul, and yes, as Rodrigo mentioned, head of North America for the Aston Martin F1 team. Essentially, I look after the growth of the sport here in the U.S. market, but also Canada and some of the other places. I think the most compelling reason I have a job is the incredible job that Liberty Media has done by pushing the sport with vehicles such as the Drive to Survive series and now the F1 movie. F1's become ubiquitous and top of tongue through so many households, and we've tried to take the charge now, leadership role, if you will, in trying to evangelize the sport. We've spoken at many conferences. Part of my role is to evangelize our teams, in particular our brand and what we bring that's different and differentiated, not just throughout Formula One, but throughout all of sports marketing. And then at the same time, look at partners and partnerships, and we've been successful at bringing in 6 or 7 partnerships in the 3 years that or actually 2.5 years that I've been part of the team. So the growth in North America is certainly happening, and I still think that we have new plateaus to get to.
Amazing. Thanks again, Shergul, for joining us.
My
Um,
pleasure.
for for those attending here, some quick route rules. We are going to have time for questions, and we actually ask that you drop your questions in the chat anytime, and we're going to round it up, answer them during the Q&A time that we left for the end. We will share today's session. It's being recorded, and a link to a longer report that we made about this topic afterwards. So you don't need to bother about taking notes or capturing any screenshots. So just sit back, just relax, just enjoy the ride. Um, it is the fast lane of cultural content and Formula One fandom, but at our own pace, right? We don't have to rush. So a quick word about Winning. The way that Winning was born is to actually advance a new way of doing marketing. For all of you that work in marketing, you know that before, years and years ago, it was enough to have a great product. If you just had some point of superiority, you did something better or more effective than your competitors, that would be enough for you to succeed in the marketplace. Then it became about brands, right? Brands became the signal for differentiation, standing out, emotional connection, so on and so forth. But today we believe culture is really what brands need to ambition for. It is when culture that brands actually create the great success stories that we all aspire and admire. Stories like Liquid Death or Lego here, seeing with the Aston Martin F1 pilots here at the Miami GP doing this amazing activation with the Formula One real life size cars, or brands like Spotify, Duolingo, or Red Bull, and many others we can mention. Those are brands that actually are making a difference in culture. And we believe that every brand actually should have the power to actually tap into that opportunity. And that's why Winning exists. Winning actually can help brands win this game with the tools that allow them to succeed. We are what we call a cultural intelligence platform that helps brands from end to end create points of superiority. We've been working with some of the world's leading marketers, such as Coca-Cola, InBev, Netflix, and Red Bull, to help them understand better what is going on in culture, evolving from social listening to what we really call the cultural intelligence, evolve the way that they do briefing from a slow creative process to Zai generated. Zai is our AI, the Zeitgeist AI. And finally, to measure that more effectively, evolving into a new metric we call share of attention. And I'll have the pleasure to talk about that, all of you in separate at a later time. But I think the first thing I wanted to touch is why Formula One? Why aren't we actually choosing to talk about Formula One? It is a brand success story. Formula One is a brand unto itself. This is an amazing story about a sport that was once niche and is now this big cultural force, as Shergul has mentioned. But what happened that we can see here on this chart that the relevance for Formula One spiked so much across the past 5 years. What actually happened to provoke this big change? That's a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. We do believe that behind this, it's all about the sport becoming a very exciting and inspiring story. That story becoming the source, a very rich and powerful source for content in many forms and very attuned to the ways that people consume content today. And finally, that content become a huge part of culture that extrapolates just basically the racing times and goes into everybody's daily lives. What few people know is that until a few years ago, there was a ban on social media. The athletes couldn't post. There was a very limited possibility for that to actually play a role into those platforms. But then, once a surge was lifted, we saw a tremendous growth on Formula One's following on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. They actually more than they grew more than 400% from 18 million to 96 million followers just for the Formula One account itself. Formula One really became a content engine with interviews with the drivers and other people that work there, behind the scenes, compilations. There is an always on content strategy that fuels people's hunger to know and see more about what's going on in the races. Shergul, I'm sure that you lived through that and can tell a little bit about more how you saw that movement taking place.
Yeah, I mean, really, it starts with the top-down approach. I think that there was probably some drivers that were quite eager to jump in and participate, but quite a few other, not just drivers, but team principals. Think of folks that have lived in a world of secrecy where 10 teams are essentially building custom-made rocket ships behind the scenes, and everything is so top secret that the idea of having cameras everywhere in the garage, it was quite startling. As some of you guys know, designs of the floors of the car or engines, that could, obviously there's been a lot of careful editing, but the initial fear was that there are a lot of trade secrets to get exposed. But the new owners of F1, Liberty Media, said, "So what? You have no choice. This is what you're doing." And the personalities early on that grasped Drive to Survive, from the very beginning, from our team, I think Lawrence Stroll and Fernando Alonso when he joined, but I think early on, folks like Danny Ricciardo or Gunther Steiner were very prominent and bringing this series to life. And as soon as that floodgate opened up through Drive to Survive on Netflix, it also opened up all kinds of social media interactions and drivers, kind of really taking hold of that.
Beautiful. We saw that movement, drivers becoming content creators, and some drivers actually driving a little bit more of that engagement than others.
Hmm.
So as you mentioned, like some of them are very natural on camera, others are still trying to keep their privacy and don't really want to engage. So it's not
Sure.
for everyone, but we see that it is very prominent about that. And as you mentioned, they have great personalities, and they're the type of people that really draw a lot of attention. And then, as you mentioned, Drive to Survive showed us the side of Formula One you never seen, the storylines to follow, things that big fans would only dream of, but also those characters to root for, those human stories. And no one watched like the US, right? We saw that 50%
Hmm.
of the Formula One US fans credit Drive to Survive as drawing them into the sport. And the geographic distribution of that audience is more than half of that it's based on the United States. What we also found was very interesting is that how Gen Z females are leading the way. 40% of Formula One's global fan base is female. 50% of TikTok followers are under 25, which really taps into the power of that platform specifically. But also 40% of the Instagram followers are under 25, which actually over indexes on how this audience and this platform
Hmm.
talks about demographics. So it is really a story of reinvention, not just geographically, but with a new audience as well.
Yeah, and in the US, I think it's something like 47% female. So
Yeah,
global 40%. It's a staggering amount, but also, I think to your point, one of the things to not forget is also Netflix says that Drive to Survive was number one in 33 different countries, the number one most watched series on Netflix.
amazing. The other thing was very impressive to us. We did our analysis with our own data. And at Winning, we can see actually the share of content, which is the number of videos that people post. And we can see the share of engagement, which is the likes, shares, comments that people leave on those
Mhm.
videos. And we actually see how the platforms are actually playing out to that. So there is a higher number of videos being posted on Instagram for sure, but we see engagement actually spiking up on TikTok also and YouTube a lot. So those videos are actually
Yeah.
getting even more traction in there.
A quick parentheses on that. I mean, we're
Awesome.
actually the only team that has a formal partnership with TikTok. So you'll see TikTok on our car, but also on our clothing, and they do quite a bit with us. Not just because of that, but we've actually had the last 3 years, we've had the most engagement in social media posts. So we take a lot of pride, not just in doing the volume of posts. I think there's certain teams that are much more reserved. We try to cover wide swaths of demographics, and we're doing lots of different types of campaigns and different mediums for different platforms. So creating that engagement is certainly, I would echo what Rodrigo said, it's certainly critical, and that's led to a direct new amount of fans that we've had here in the US.
One thing is tied to another, but you crack the code on the platform, and that's great. And the other code that we saw, the sport cracking, is actually showing up where culture lives. So we saw the staggering amount of niches that actually intersect and have a higher affinity with Formula One fans. We saw over nine. We saw that actually the average post that connects, the average video that connects Formula One with memes amasses something like 90,000 views. Sorry, 90,000 engagements, so likes, shares, and comments. And the average post that connects Formula One and fashion, I'm going to touch on fashion a little bit deeper later on, um, gathers 50,000 engagements and so on and so forth. So the affinities between the sport itself and other cultural passion points from people was also instrumental into creating bridges from where those audiences were already paying attention at and the sport itself. That expansion also through culture was instrumental about that. And that's what we saw. Formula One became very fashionable. We saw all those partnerships, Mercedes with Adidas, Ferrari with Puma, Aston Martin with Racket, we see McLaren and Rude, and tremendous engagement, like a total accumulated 61.1 million engagements with 151 million views, and over 2,300 creators talking about the intersection of Formula One and fashion. Shergul, can you tell us a little bit more about that, how that came to be, and what you anticipate that being for you?
The intersection with fashion, I mean, I think, with us, it's actually Hugo Boss is our biggest fashion partner, has been for the last 3 years. And now this year we've added on Puma. There's just a tremendous amount of desire, I think, for both high-end as well as sportswear brands to be associated with Formula One. I mean, the drivers themselves, most of them are young, good-looking guys, and they're getting a lot of camera eyeballs. Obviously, they're on social media, but also these shows, and they're going to all the big, glamorous events. You'll see them whether it's a Super Bowl or a Wimbledon or Champions League finals. You're seeing them at, I think Lewis Hamilton was at the Met Gala, and you've got icons showing up, and they're almost, they might have personal brands for sure. In our case, Hugo Boss has signed us as we're a they're a big sponsor to our team, but they also have endorsement deals with both Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. So there isn't any disconnect. It's not like you're going to see, Fernando Alonso walking around in Armani. He's Hugo Boss. So I think that's been a very big driver, because you can also then set different types of clothing lines for sale, right? There's not just the polos and hats that you see on drivers, but you can have a sportswear, a leisure wear, and then you can have a formal wear, leveraging the brands from the Formula One teams.
Amazing, fantastic. And lastly, I want to touch upon like how brands are chasing this dream. And I remember Shergul, on our previous conversation, you were very clear and laid out the different ways that brands can show up in Formula One, right? They can
Mm,
sport as a whole. They can have a relationship with a team. They can have a relationship with a pilot. They can have a relationship with a racing, specific race on the calendar, right? There are all those different ways that brand can actually
mm,
integrate. I love to just touch on three of them and then gather your thoughts on how other brands are doing.
sure.
Definitely see Lego playing as an amazing role, not just in Formula One, but across the board. Just this weekend, they were at the Fanatics Fan Fest in a partnership with a collab with Nike. So Lego and Nike are launching a shoe together. They had an activation there where people could actually play with those both brands at the same time. And that again, Formula One in Miami, they really made that big splash with the real size cars and the pilots, the drivers driving them. So we see that the way they're doing actually extrapolates just specific sponsorships, but actually playing that role in culture seems to be very, very successful for them. Another brand that we saw that is being successful at partnering with a team is MasterCard, in a way that are actually not just having this relationship with a specific team, but they are also activating that in a very consistent way. And is basically a showing on how this can be actually disruptive to brands like Shell, who actually have been so well connected with Formula One for a long time. But it shows that another brand that can come and actually and be successful at entering that. And they are putting so much awareness into the activations they're doing, it's making that unmissable. And finally, we saw in Miami Liquid IV really on the ground, helping both spectators, help the audience stay hydrated during a very hot weekend, and also with the pilots because they have a superior hydration that can help drivers during races that can be very taxing to their bodies. They even have this co-branded Formula One secret flavor that they launched that weekend to draw more attention to that. So there are really many lessons we can see here the brands can play depending on how they want to show up. And in a way, for me, the summary of the lessons from Formula One to any brand that wants to play a role in that, it's first to actually have this cultural first strategy. This comes all the way from how Formula One itself opened up to this new world of social platforms and social media. They humanize this brand by actually having all those amazing ambassadors because people want to engage with other people. They just don't want to engage with those abstract entities, brands. They want actually to see the humans that are doing that. And second, broaden up the scope. It's not just about what you do, what you offer. The same way that Formula One is not just about the competition itself, but all those different nuances, all those different cultural touch points that can actually create those bridges between what people are interested and the story that you want to tell. The second point, again, the right fans on the right platform. They tap into those hyper engaged audiences to amplify their voice. And that's something that we believe every brand should do as well. And when we help brands understand who are those long hanging fruits and create those bridges between the topic that you want to talk and the topics that people are already interested in. So to create those bridges to your message. Um, Instagram for content, TikTok for impact, just as an example of how a compounded social platform, cross platform can work. And brands that win, they play differently. They actually find out their own ways to show up be it embracing the culture like Lego, be about solving a real problem like Liquid IV, or making yourself invisible and throwing a lot of media support like MasterCard. But there are many ways to win at that, as the same way there are many ways that brands can show up and create to this territory. Shergul, what other good examples that you think could be fitting here?
Well, I think the point that I'm telling people is that we just are hitting a tipping point. I think in 2 days the F1 movie goes national and global. And they shut down Times Square. The cars were all out there in the middle of Times Square, and um, there's been a series of brands that you never would have in the past associated with Formula One that have flocked in. Lego is a great example, but Disney signed a deal with Formula One. So soon you might see Disney characters in F1 outfits. You might see theme parks with F1 activations. You've got Pepsi with 3 or 4 different products coming into Formula One, and then McDonald's and regional deals where you can buy the Happy Meal and you get the toy car from the Apex car from the movie. So again, this is putting much more emphasis on consumer brands and the popularity of the sport. I think all that does is it makes each of the 20 drivers, let's not forget, it's only 20 drivers. Most American sports teams have far more than 20, except for NBA guys, on one team. The entire sport has 20 guys. So these 20 guys their celebrity and star power and social media audiences and following is just going to skyrocket. And that just fuels the whole sport, but also, ultimately TV ratings, hopefully, and our ability to get more and more sponsors involved.
Amazing. I have time now. We have time for questions now, but I want to ask you a question before anybody else. Have you watched the movie yet?
I have not. I was invited to go to the premiere. People here might say, "What the heck are you doing not going?" But again, I have a wife and family, and I had just gone to the Montreal Grand Prix, so I kindly declined, and I'm going to watch it with my wife next week. After the opening weekend buzz dies down. But I've seen them shoot it at 3 or 4 different Grand Prix. It's pretty cool. They kind of slow down the cars, and then in post production they accelerate it all. But Brad Pitt was popping up everywhere last year.
Amazing. What an experience. What an experience. I think we have questions from the audience now. Monica, you want to share with us?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm here to moderate some of these questions. So it looks like we have two. Why don't we start with the one that we have here for Shergul? Shergul, with the US being such a rapidly growing market for F1, how is Aston Martin tailoring their strategy specifically for American audiences?
No, I think that's a great question. I mean, we've done, for example, merchandise that is maybe Austin specific versus Miami specific versus Las Vegas specific. We've also done social media campaigns that are endemic to each market. So for example, I think we had a DJ outside of our garage, and we played into a lot of nightlife activities. In Miami, we did a lot really cool activation where we drove the F1 car in a see-through glass box and drove it up and down South Beach and kind of let people take pictures with it. We also did activation in Little Cuba, Little Havana, in Miami. I think in Austin we've done some STEM education programs. We did a campaign that focused on women in Texas actually, and we brought a bunch of fans into the paddock. So we almost always have programs. Actually, one thing we did in Texas too was we had a party where anyone could sign up and come for free. Obviously, we capped it once we reached, I think, 2,000 entries, but we had a rooftop party with the during the day you could watch qualifiers and watch the F1 race, but also at night, I think we had I think it was the Texas Georgia game on. For everyone to kind of watch, and it was a great time. So I think more so than other teams, we're actually spending quite a bit of time in making these 3 stops, big activations for us, and also we realized that because this is a 5-year-old sport for most of the Americans, there's a fan base to win. And if you create brand love and create events and parties that they can go to, and you're giving away hats and you're making it a fun, exciting experience, we do have this amazing brand that people, especially in America, have loved for years, from the James Bond heritage, but also the elegance and prestige of the British luxury car. Has had a great popular effect. So people like getting an Aston Martin hat. It's a fun thing to receive versus an orange one. No.
Love that. It looks like there's a great question here that actually piggybacks off of that. When we had the conversation earlier about F1 drivers and them becoming true content creators, would love to hear, how does Aston Martin empower their drivers to create authentic content that's true to themselves while still aligning
What's
team
you know it's
values and
This is a,
brand?
gr- it's that's a great one. Actually, Fernando Alonso does his own accounts. It's incredible. This guy is oldest guy on the grid, 43-year-old guy, and he's does all of his own TikTok dances, and some of the stuff is completely unscripted too. So, for example, there was rumors of him linked to Taylor Swift, and there was a song she came out with in her latest album about Aston Martin driving her into a ditch. And so he just kind of played into it with his own TikTok ideas, and he's got a great personality, and I think it's very authentic. We let obviously there's certain team driven campaigns and sponsor driven that we do, but the drivers are certainly entitled and encouraged to do their own authentic content.
Love that. I know we're almost at time, but Rodrigo, it looks like we have one question that I think we might have a little bit of time for, or you know what, why don't we do a little wrap up? I'll pass it over back to you. Oh, you're on mute right now.
Of course, I was going to do this. We're more than happy to take on any other questions that you might have separately. As I promised, we actually have a link here on the screen. This QR code leads directly to the full Formula One report that we've put together with some of this data and other ones as well, links to the videos that we didn't have time to show today. And as usual, we are open to have any other conversations with anyone that wants to understand a little bit better about what we do and how cultural intelligence can help brands. I want to thank again Shergul Arshad, my great friend, for joining me today here to tell you a little bit more about how Formula One and the brands are actually making a huge cultural impact. Thank you, Shergul.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Monica, also for making sure we had a great show today. And thanks everyone for attending. This was being really fun.